Lisa Martin sat in her new office on the fourth floor of the Justice Department building. The March wind blew hard against the windows as she looked through stacks of papers on her desk. She had been Deputy Attorney General for only 3 weeks, but already the job felt like too much work for one person. Pam Bondi had given her these files to review. Most of them were boring reports about drug cases and immigration problems, but one folder caught her eye. It had a red mark on it that meant top secret. Lisa opened it carefully. Inside were printed emails and phone records. At first, she thought, they were just normal government communications. But as she read more, her heart started beating faster. These were not normal at all. The emails showed Senator Lindsey Graham talking to people he should not have been talking to. The phone records showed calls to Ukrainian officials that were never reported to the White House. Lisa read one email 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. In the email, Graham told a Ukrainian diplomat about President Trump's secret plan to cut military aid. He warned them that Trump wanted to force Ukraine to accept a peace deal that would give Russia some of the land it had taken. Graham wrote that he thought this was wrong and dangerous for America. Lisa felt sick. To her stomach, she knew that senators were not supposed to conduct their own foreign policy. Only the president and his team could make deals with other countries. What Graham had done might be against the law. She picked up her phone to call Pam Bondi. Then, put it down again. This was too big for a phone call. She needed to show Bondi these papers in person. 20 minutes later, Lisa knocked on the Attorney General's office door. Pam Bondi looked up from her computer. She was still getting used to her new job, too. After being confirmed by the Senate just a month ago, Bondi was trying to prove she could handle being the top law enforcement officer in the country. "Lisa, come in. You look worried?" "What's wrong?" Bondi asked. Lisa closed the door behind her and sat down. She placed the folder on Bondi's desk. "I found something in the files you gave me. Something bad." Bondi opened the folder and started reading. Her face changed as she went through the papers. She was quiet for a long time. "Are these real?" Bondi finally asked. "I checked them twice." The emails came from the FBI's investigation into foreign interference. The phone records came from the NSA. They're real. Bondi leaned back in her chair. Be hard, but she never expected something like this. Graham had been a senator for over 20 years. He was supposed to be on Trump's side, even though they sometimes disagreed. "How many people know about this?" Bondi asked. "Just me and whoever collected the information originally. Maybe 5 people total? Good, we need to keep it that way for now." Bondi stood up and walked to her window. She could see the Capitol building in the distance. Somewhere in that building, Lindsey Graham was probably in his office, not knowing that his secret activities had been discovered. "What Graham did could be treason," Bondi said quietly, "or espionage, or violation of the Logan Act." Lisa added, "The Logan Act was an old law that made it illegal for private citizens to negotiate with foreign governments without permission. Senators were not supposed to make their own foreign policy deals." Bondi turned back to Lisa. "I need you to call Kevin Brooks from the FBI. Tell him to come here right away. Don't tell him why over the phone." An hour later, Kevin Brooks sat in the same chair where Lisa had been. Brooks was a 20-year veteran of the FBI who specialized in political crimes. He had investigated corrupt governors, dishonest judges, and crooked congressmen. But he had never investigated someone as important as Lindsey Graham. Brooks read through the folder carefully. He asked Lisa questions about where she found the papers and who else might have seen them. He was very thorough. "This is serious," Brooks said finally. "If these papers are accurate, Senator Graham broke several federal laws." "What's our next step?" Bondi asked. "We need to verify everything. I want to check the phone records against telephone company records. I want to examine the original emails on government servers. I want to talk to the FBI agents who first collected this information. How long will that take?" "It's 2 weeks, maybe 3. But Attorney General, I need to warn you about something." "What?" "If we start investigating Lindsey Graham, word will get out eventually. When it does, this will become the biggest political story in the country. The president will want to know why we're investigating one of his allies. The media will go crazy. Everyone will have an opinion." Bondi nodded. She had thought about this already. Investigating Graham would put her in a difficult position. Trump expected loyalty from his team. But Bondi had sworn an oath to enforce the law fairly, no matter who broke it. Kevin, I want you to start the investigation, but keep it small. Only use agents you trust completely.
No.
Don't put anything in writing unless you have to. Don't tell anyone outside this room what we're doing. Brooks stood up. Yes, ma'am. I'll start tomorrow. After Brooks left, Lisa and Bondi sat in silence for several minutes. Are we doing the right thing? Lisa asked. I think so, but it's going to be hard. Graham has friends everywhere in Washington. He's been here longer than most people. When this comes out, those friends will attack us. They'll say we're being political. They'll say we're trying to hurt Trump by going after his allies. But we're just following the law. Yes, but that won't matter to his supporters. They'll see this as another witch hunt. Bondi looked at the folder again. Inside were copies of 12 emails and 43 phone calls. Sharing information he should not have shared. Each one was evidence of possible crimes. Lisa, I want you to do something for me. Call the White House and schedule a meeting with the president for next week. Don't tell them what it's about. Just say I need to brief him on a sensitive matter. You're going to tell the president? Not yet, but I will have to eventually. When I do tell him, I want him to hear it from me first, not from some reporter or political enemy. As the sun set over Washington, Bondi remained in her office. She thought about her confirmation hearing just 2 months ago. Senators had asked her if she would be independent. She would investigate anyone who broke the law, regardless of politics. She had promised them she would. Now she had her first chance to prove it. The decision she made about Lindsey Graham would define her time as Attorney General. It would show whether she was truly independent or just another political appointee. Outside her window, the lights came on in the Capitol building. Somewhere in that building, Lindsey Graham was probably preparing for another day of being a senator. He had no idea that his secret activities had been discovered. He had no idea that by tomorrow the FBI would begin building a case against him. The investigation was about to begin. Kevin Brooks walked into the FBI field office at 7 in the morning. The building was quiet except for the security guards and a few early workers. He had barely slept the night before. Thinking about the investigation he was about to start, he had chosen 2 people to help him. Rachel Turner was the best computer expert in the FBI. She could find hidden files, cover deleted emails, and trace phone calls better than anyone. Gary Collins used to work for the NSA before joining the FBI. He understood how government communications worked and knew what to look for when people tried to hide their activities. Brooks had told them to meet him in a small conference room on the 3rd floor. This room was special because it blocked electronic signals. No one could listen to their conversations or hack into their computers. Rachel arrived first. She was carrying 2 laptops and a bag full of computer equipment. 30 years old, but she had already solved dozens of important cases. Good morning, Kevin. This must be something big if we're meeting in the secure room. It is big. Bigger than anything we've worked on before. Gary walked in 5 minutes later. He was older, with gray hair and thick glasses. He had spent 15 years at the NSA before joining the FBI. He knew more about government secrets than almost anyone. So what's this about? Gary asked as he sat down. Brooks closed the door and turned on the room's security system. Now no one could hear what they said. We're investigating Senator Lindsey Graham for possible treason and espionage. Rachel almost dropped her coffee. Gary just stared at Brooks. You're serious? Rachel asked. Dead serious. You have evidence that Graham has been sharing classified information with Ukrainian officials without permission. He's been conducting his own foreign policy behind the president's back. Brooks opened his briefcase and pulled out copies of the documents Lisa Martin had found. He spread them on the table. I need you both to verify that these are real. Rachel, I want you to trace the emails back to their original sources. Gary, I want you to check the phone records against NSA databases. For the next 2 hours, Rachel and Gary examined every piece of evidence. They used their computers to check government servers and communication records. They compared dates and times to make sure everything matched. The emails are real, Rachel said finally. They came from Graham's personal email account, but he sent them from his Senate office computer. I can see the digital fingerprints. The phone calls are real too, Gary added. I found the original records in the NSA database. Graham made these calls from his cell phone, always late at night or early in the morning, and worried at the same time. He was relieved because the evidence was solid. He was worried because now they had to build a case against one of the most powerful people in Washington. What's our next step? Rachel asked. We need more evidence. I want to know everything Graham has been doing for the past 6 months. He's talked to, where he's been, what he said. But we have to be very careful. If word gets out that we're investigating him, he'll destroy evidence and warn his contacts. Gary raised his hand. I have an idea. The NSA keeps records of all international communications. If Graham has been talking to foreigners, there will be records. I can access them without anyone knowing. Do it, Brooks said. But be careful. Don't leave any traces that you were looking. For the next 3 weeks, the team worked in secret. Rachel spent hours going through Graham's computer activities. She found dozens of emails to foreign policy experts, Ukrainian officials, and European diplomats. Many of these communications had never been reported to the White House or State Department. Gary discovered that Graham had made over 100 phone calls, too, international numbers, in the past 6 months. Some of these calls lasted over an hour. Graham had also received calls from Ukrainian government officials, including some very high-ranking people. The most shocking discovery came when Rachel found Graham's travel records. He had made 3 trips to Europe in the past 6 months. On each trip, he had met with Ukrainian officials. But his official schedule showed different activities. He had been lying about what he was doing. Look at this, Rachel said, pointing. To her computer screen, Graham's official schedule says he was meeting with NATO officials in Brussels. But his phone records show he was actually in Warsaw, meeting with Ukrainian defense ministers. Brooks studied the evidence. The case against Graham was getting stronger every day, but he needed more proof. He needed to show that Graham knew he was breaking the law when he shared classified information. The breakthrough came when Gary found encrypted messages on a secure communication app. Graham had been using this app to talk to Dr. Stephen Parker. His longtime advisor, in these messages, Graham admitted he was worried about getting caught in one message. Graham wrote, I know what I'm doing is risky, but Trump's plan will destroy Ukraine. Someone has to warn them. In another message, Dr. Parker replied, You need to be more careful. If anyone finds out about these meetings, you could go to prison. Graham had written back, I'd rather go to prison than let Trump hand Ukraine too. Putin, Brooks, read these messages 3 times. They showed that Graham knew he was breaking the law, but decided to do it anyway. This was exactly the kind of evidence prosecutors needed to win a case, while Brooks and his team gathered evidence. Senator Lindsey Graham continued his normal activities. He went to committee meetings, gave speeches on the Senate floor, and appeared on television news shows. He had no idea that FBI agents were watching his every move. But Jake Morrison, Graham's chief of staff, was starting to worry. Noticed that government officials were asking strange questions about Graham's travel schedule. Some foreign contacts had stopped returning Graham's phone calls. Senator, I think something might be wrong, Morrison said during a private meeting in Graham's office. What do you mean? I've been getting calls from reporters asking about your trips to Europe. And the State Department has been asking for copies of your meeting notes. That's not normal. Graham felt a cold fear in his stomach. He had been careful, but maybe not careful enough. What kind of questions are the reporters asking? They want to know who you met with in Warsaw and Brussels, or asking about your conversations with Ukrainian officials. Someone must have told them something. That night, Graham called Dr. Parker on his secure phone. Stephen, I think they might know about our activities. What makes you think that? People are asking questions. Reporters, government officials. It feels like they're investigating me. Dr. Parker was quiet for a long moment. Lindsey, if they are investigating you, you need to be very careful about what you say and do. Don't destroy anything, but don't volunteer information either. Should I get a lawyer? Not yet. That would just make you look guilty. But be prepared. If this investigation is real, it's going to get very bad very quickly. Graham hung up the phone and sat in his office for a long time. Outside his window, he could see the lights of the Justice Department building. somewhere in that building. FBI agents might be building a case against him. He had spent his entire career serving his country. He had done what he thought was right, even when it was difficult. He might pay the ultimate price for his principles. The investigation was closing in, and Graham was starting to feel the pressure. President Trump sat behind his desk in the Oval Office, reading a one-page summary that Monica Hayes had given him. Monica was his chief of staff, and she always brought him the most important news first thing in the morning. Trump's face grew. Read as he read about the investigation into Lindsey Graham. He threw the paper down on his desk and looked up at Monica. How long has this been going on? About a month, sir? Attorney General Bondi has been running a secret investigation through the FBI, and nobody told me? Bondi wanted to gather all the facts before briefing you. She didn't want to worry you with incomplete information. Trump stood up and walked to the window. He could see protesters outside the White House fence, holding signs about different issues. He wondered what they would think if they knew about Graham's betrayal. Get Bondi over here now. She's already on her way, sir. She should be here. In 10 minutes, when Pam Bondi arrived at the White House, she carried a thick folder with all the evidence against Graham. She had practiced what she would say to the president. She knew he would be angry. Trump didn't wait for her to sit down. Before he started talking, Pam, what the hell's going on with Lindsey Graham? Mr. President, we have solid evidence that Senator Graham has been sharing classified information with Ukrainian officials without authorization. He's been conducting unauthorized diplomacy behind your back. Bondi opened her folder and showed Trump some of the evidence. She explained about the emails, the phone calls, and the secret meetings in Europe. Trump listened carefully, his anger growing with each new detail. How long has he been doing this? At least 6 months, maybe longer. We're still investigating. I want him arrested today. Sir, we need to follow proper legal procedures. We can't just arrest a sitting senator without following the rules. I don't care about the rules. He betrayed me. He betrayed America. Bondi had expected this reaction. She knew Trump would want immediate action, but she also knew they had to do things the right way, Mr. President. If we don't follow proper procedures, any case against Graham will be thrown out of court. We need to be patient and do this correctly. Trump walked back to his desk and sat down heavily. What's the next step? I want to interview Graham directly. I want to give him a chance to explain his actions before we decide whether to file charges. Fine. But I want to know everything that happens. And Pam, if you find evidence that he committed crimes, I want him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Senator Graham was in his office trying to work on normal Senate business. But he couldn't concentrate. His suspicions about being investigated were getting stronger every day. Jake Morrison knocked on his door and walked in without waiting for permission. His face was pale and worried. Senator, we have a problem. What now? Attorney General Bondi's office just called. She wants to meet with you tomorrow at the Justice Department. She says it's about a sensitive matter that requires your immediate attention. Graham felt his stomach drop. This was it. They knew. Did she say what it was about? No, sir. But her assistant was very formal. This isn't a friendly meeting. Graham picked up his phone and called Dr. Stephen Parker. Stephen, I need to see you right away. An hour later, Dr. Parker sat across from Graham in his Senate office. Parker had been Graham's advisor for 15 years. He was one of the few people Graham trusted completely. They want to meet with me tomorrow, Graham said. Who wants to meet with you, Pam Bondi, at the Justice Department? Parker was quiet for a long moment. He understood what this meant. Lindsey, you need to get a lawyer. Right now. Can't get a lawyer yet. That'll make me look guilty before I even know what they want. You already know what they want. They know about your communications with the Ukrainians. Graham stood up and walked to his window. He could see tourists taking pictures in front of the Capitol building. Normal people living normal lives, not worried about going to prison. I did what I thought was right, Stephen. I couldn't let Trump destroy Ukraine just to make a deal with Putin. I understand why you did it. That doesn't make it legal. So what do? You go to the meeting tomorrow, you listen to what they have to say, you answer their questions honestly but carefully, and then you call a lawyer. The next morning, Graham arrived at the Justice Department building. He had driven himself instead of using his official car, didn't want anyone to know about this meeting. Pam Bondi met him in her office. Also present were Lisa Martin and Kevin Brooks. Graham recognized Brooks from newspaper photos. Everyone knew he investigated political crimes. "Senator Graham, thank you for coming," Bondi said. "Please have a seat." Graham sat down, trying to look calm. Inside his heart was beating fast. "Senator, we're investigating possible violations of federal law regarding unauthorized communications with foreign officials. We have evidence that you've been sharing classified information with Ukrainian government representatives without proper authorization." Bondi opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. Graham recognized his own emails and phone records. "Do you recognize these communications?" Graham looked at the papers. There was no point in denying what was obvious. "Yes, I recognize them." "Can you explain why you were sharing this information with foreign officials?" Graham took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been dreading for months. "I believe that President Trump's policy toward Ukraine was dangerous for American national security interests. I felt obligated to warn our allies about potential changes that could harm them and ultimately harm us. Senator, you understand that private citizens, including senators, are not authorized to conduct foreign policy negotiations. I wasn't negotiating anything. I was sharing information, classified information. Information that I believed our allies needed to know." Kevin Brooks leaned forward. "Senator, did you know that sharing classified information with foreign nationals without authorization is a federal crime?" Graham was quiet for a long moment. This was the question he had been afraid of. "I knew there were risks. But I believed the greater risk was staying silent while America made a terrible mistake." Bondi made notes while Graham talked. She could see that he genuinely believed he had done the right thing. But believing you're right doesn't make something legal. "Senator, we have evidence of multiple communications over several months. We have records of unreported meetings with foreign officials. We have encrypted messages where you acknowledge the risks of your actions." Graham's shoulders sagged. He realized they had everything. What happens now? "That depends on several factors. We're still investigating. We'll need to review all the evidence before making any decisions about charges." "Am I under arrest?" "No, not at this time. But I strongly advise you to retain legal counsel." "How long do I have? The investigation is ongoing. We'll inform you of any developments." Graham stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back to Bondi. "Attorney General, I want you to know that everything I did was motivated by love of country. I may have broken the law, but I never betrayed America." After Graham left, Bondi sat quietly with her team. "What do you think?" Lisa asked. "I think he's telling the truth about his motivations. But that doesn't matter. The law is the law. Are we going to charge him?" "We're going to finish the investigation first. But based on what we have, yes, I think we'll have to charge him." Outside the Justice Department, Graham sat in his car for several minutes before starting the engine. His phone rang. It was Dr. "Parker, how did it go?" "They have everything, Stephen." "Everything. I'm sorry, Lindsey. So am I." Graham drove back to the Capitol, knowing that his life as he knew it was about to end. 2 weeks after the meeting at the Justice Department, Pam Bondi made her decision. She had reviewed all the evidence with her team. She had consulted with legal experts. She had even prayed about it. Evidence was clear, and the law was clear. Senator Lindsey Graham would be charged with crimes. Maria Gonzalez sat in the prosecutor's office. Reading through boxes of evidence, she had been chosen to lead the case against Graham. Maria was tough and smart. She had prosecuted corrupt politicians before, but never anyone as famous as a United States senator. The charges were serious. Graham would be accused of violating the Espionage Act by sharing classified information. He would be charged with violating the Logan Act by conducting unauthorized foreign policy. He would also face charges of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Are you ready for this? Pam Bondi asked Maria during their final meeting before filing charges. As ready as anyone can be. The evidence is strong. We have his emails, his phone calls, his travel records. We have witnesses who saw him at meetings he never reported. We even have his own words admitting he knew what he was doing was risky.
Good?
Because this case will be watched by the whole world. Everyone will have an opinion. Media will analyze every word you say. Graham's supporters will attack you personally. I understand. But the law applies to everyone, even senators. Next morning, news trucks surrounded the federal courthouse in Washington. Reporters from every major network stood outside, waiting for Graham to arrive. The story had leaked the night before. Everyone knew that charges were being filed today. Graham arrived in a black car with his lawyer, Robert Chen. Chen was one of the best criminal defense attorneys in Washington. He had defended governors, congressmen, and cabinet members. He charged $500 per hour, but Graham's supporters were paying his fees. Inside the courthouse, Judge Patricia Williams read the charges out loud. Graham stood quietly. Next to his lawyer, wearing a dark suit and looking older than his 69 years, Senator Lindsey Graham. You are charged with willful communication of national defense information to persons not entitled to receive it. In violation of the Espionage Act, you are also charged with violation of the Logan Act, conspiracy and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor, Chen said for his client. Graham was released on his own recognizance, which meant he didn't have to pay bail. But he had to surrender his passport and promise not to contact any foreign officials. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions at Graham. He ignored them all and got into his car. But Chen stopped to make a statement. Senator Graham is a patriot who has served his country for over 30 years. He acted out of love for America, not for personal gain. We will fight these charges vigorously and prove his innocence. The trial began 3 months later. The courthouse was packed every day with reporters, politicians, and curious citizens. Security was tight because of threats from both Grahams. Supporters and his critics, Maria Gonzalez presented the government's case methodically. She showed the jury emails where Graham shared classified information. She played recordings of phone calls where Graham discussed military plans with Ukrainian officials. She brought in witnesses who testified about Graham's secret meetings. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Maria said during her opening statement, this case is about the rule of law. No one, not even a United States senator, is above the law. The defendant decided he knew better than the president. He decided he could conduct his own foreign policy. He was wrong, and his actions were illegal. Robert Chen fought back hard. He argued that Graham was trying to protect America, not hurt. He brought in character witnesses who testified about Graham's long service to the country. Tom Bradley, Graham's friend for 40 years, took the witness stand. Lindsey Graham is the most patriotic person I know, Bradley said. Loves his country more than anything. If he shared information with allies, it was because he thought it would help America, not hurt it. Chen also argued that the laws Graham was accused of breaking were old and unclear. The Logan Act had rarely been used in over 200 years. The Espionage Act was written for spies, not senators trying to help allies. My client is not a spy, Chen told the jury. He is a public servant who made difficult decisions in complicated times. You may disagree with his choices, but disagreement is not a crime. The most dramatic moment came when Graham himself took the witness stand. The courtroom was completely silent as he spoke. I have served in Congress for 28 years, Graham said. I have always tried to do what I thought was best for America. When I saw President Trump planning to abandon Ukraine, I couldn't stay silent. I knew it would be bad for America and bad for the world. Maria Gonzalez cross-examined Graham aggressively. Senator, did you know that sharing classified information with foreign officials without authorization is against the law? I knew there were legal risks. Did you report your meetings with Ukrainian officials to the State Department? No. Did you tell the White House about your communications? No. So you conducted secret foreign policy behind the president's back. Graham paused for a long moment. I provided information to allies that I believed they needed to know. Without authorization from the government you work for? Yes. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Expert witnesses testified about national security law. Former government officials debated whether Graham's actions were reasonable or reckless. Political scientists discussed the separation of powers between the president and Congress. Nancy Peterson, political reporter, covered the trial every day. She wrote that it had become about more than just Graham's guilt or innocence. This trial is really about two different ideas of patriotism, she wrote. Graham's supporters see him as a hero who tried to save America from a terrible mistake. His critics see him as a traitor who undermined democracy itself. Public opinion was divided. Polls showed that 60% of Democrats thought Graham was guilty. 70% of Republicans thought he was innocent. Independent voters were split down the middle. The jury included 12 citizens from the Washington area. There were teachers, mechanics, nurses, and office workers. They had to decide whether Graham was a patriot or a criminal. During the final week of testimony, the prosecution called their last witness. Dr. Stephen Parker, Graham's longtime advisor, had agreed to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Parker's testimony was devastating for Graham. He read text messages where Graham worried about getting caught. He described conversations where Graham admitted he was breaking the law, but said it was necessary. Senator Graham told me that sometimes you have to break bad laws to do good things, Parker testified. He said he would rather go to prison than let Ukraine be destroyed. When Chen cross-examined Parker, he tried to show that Graham's motives were pure. Did Senator Graham ever ask for money in exchange for this information? No. Did he try to help any foreign country hurt America? No. He was trying to help America by helping its allies. In your opinion, was Senator Graham acting out of patriotism or greed? Patriotism, without question. After 6 weeks of testimony, both sides gave their closing arguments. Maria Gonzalez spoke for 2 hours, reviewing all the evidence against Graham. The defendant may have had good intentions, she said. But good intentions don't excuse criminal behavior. If we allow senators to conduct their own foreign policy whenever they disagree with the president, we will have chaos instead of democracy. Robert. Chen spoke for 3 hours, asking the jury to consider Graham's lifetime of service. Lindsey Graham made a mistake, Chen said. But it was a mistake born of love for his country, not hatred for it. He doesn't deserve to go to prison for trying to protect America's allies. The jury deliberated for 4 days. The whole country waited for their decision. Graham spent those days at home, mostly alone, reading and praying. On a Friday afternoon in July, the jury finally reached their verdict. The courtroom was packed as Judge Patricia Williams prepared to read the jury's verdict. Senator Lindsey Graham sat next to his lawyer, Robert Chen, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Behind him, the gallery was filled with reporters, political supporters, and curious citizens who had followed the trial for weeks. Graham's sister Nancy sat in the front row, tears already forming in her eyes. She had raised Lindsey after their parents died when he was young. She had watched him become a successful lawyer, then a congressman, then a senator. Now she might watch him become a convicted criminal. Judge Williams looked at the jury foreman, a retired teacher named Harold Barnes. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor, we have." "Please read the verdict." Barnes stood up and unfolded a piece of paper. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. On the charge of willful communication of national defense information under the Espionage Act, we find the defendant guilty. Graham closed his eyes. His sister Nancy began crying softly. On the charge of violating the Logan Act, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant not guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant not guilty. Judge Williams thanked the jury and dismissed them. She scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Graham was allowed to remain free until then, but he had to wear an electronic ankle monitor. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Robert Chen. "What's your reaction to the verdict?" one reporter shouted. "We're disappointed by the guilty verdicts, but we're pleased the jury rejected the conspiracy and obstruction charges." This shows they understood that Senator Graham was not acting with criminal intent, but out of misguided patriotism. "Will you appeal?" "We're considering all our options." Meanwhile, Graham walked quickly to his car, ignoring the reporter's questions. His phone was already ringing with calls from friends and political allies. Some wanted to offer support. Others wanted to distance themselves from him. That evening, President Trump held a press conference in the Rose Garden. "Today, justice was served," Trump said. Senator Graham betrayed his oath of office and betrayed the American people. He thought he knew better than the President of the United States. He was wrong, and now he's been held accountable. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. President, some people are calling this a political prosecution. What's your response? This had nothing to do with politics. Attorney General Bondi followed the evidence wherever it led. Graham broke the law, and he got caught. It's that simple. 2 weeks later, Graham returned to court for sentencing. He had spent those weeks meeting with friends and family. He was trying to prepare for whatever Judge Williams would decide. The sentencing hearing lasted all day. Character witnesses testified about Graham's years of public service. His former Air Force colleagues talked about his military record. Fellow senators from both parties spoke about his dedication to the country. Senator John Thune, the Republican leader, testified by video because he couldn't be in court. Lindsey Graham and I have disagreed on many issues over the years, Thune said, but I've never questioned his patriotism or his love for America. He made a serious mistake, but he doesn't deserve to have his life destroyed because of it. Even some Democrats spoke up for Graham. Senator Joe Manchin, who had worked with Graham on several bills, asked the judge for mercy. Senator Graham is a good man who made a bad decision, Manchin said. He was trying to help America's allies, not hurt America itself. But Maria Gonzalez, the prosecutor, argued that Graham's position made his crimes more serious, not less serious. Defendant was not an ordinary citizen, she told Judge Williams. He was a United States Senator with access to the highest levels of classified information. When someone in his position breaks the law, it undermines the entire system of government. Finally, Judge Williams asked Graham if he wanted to speak before she announced his sentence. Graham stood up slowly. He had prepared remarks, but he decided to speak from his heart instead. Your Honor, I have spent my entire adult life serving this country, in the military, in Congress, and in the Senate. I've made many decisions over the years, some good and some bad. But I have always tried to do what I thought was best for America. He paused and looked around the courtroom. I did what was wrong legally. The jury made that clear. But I want everyone to understand why I did it. I saw President Trump about to make a decision that I believed would be catastrophic for American security. I felt I had to act. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking to be excused. I accept responsibility for my actions. But I want people to know that I never intended to hurt America. Everything I did was because I love this country. Judge Williams listened carefully. When Graham finished, she was quiet for several minutes, reviewing her notes. Senator Graham, she finally said, you have served your country with distinction for many years. You're clearly a patriot who loves America. But patriotism does not excuse breaking the law. The jury found you guilty of serious crimes. These crimes struck at the heart of our constitutional system. It's not democracy. Foreign policy is conducted by the executive branch, not by individual senators who disagree with the president. However, I also recognize that your actions were motivated by what you believed were the best interests of the United States. You did not act for personal gain. You did not seek to help America's enemies. Therefore, I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, suspended pending completion of 2 years probation. You will also pay a fine of $50,000 and perform 500 hours of community service. Graham's knees almost buckled with relief. He had expected to go to prison immediately. Instead, he would be on probation, which meant he could stay free as long as he followed all the rules. But Judge Williams wasn't finished. Senator Graham, you must also resign from the United States Senate immediately. You cannot continue to serve in a position of trust after being convicted of betraying that trust. This was the blow Graham had been dreading most. Losing his Senate seat meant losing his life's work. It meant the end of his political career. Furthermore, Judge Williams continued, you are prohibited from holding any federal government position for the rest of your life. You may not lobby Congress or any federal agency. Your security clearance is permanently revoked. After the sentencing, Graham stood outside the courthouse one last time as a United States Senator. Reporters shouted questions, but he only made a brief statement. I accept Judge Williams' sentence. I will resign from the Senate today. I want to thank the people of South Carolina for giving me the honor of serving them for 28 years. I'm sorry I let them down. That evening, Pam Bondi reflected on the case in her office. The investigation had taken 4 months. The trial had lasted 6 weeks. Now it was over. Lisa Martin knocked on her door. "How do you feel about the outcome?" Lisa asked. Bondi replied, "I'm glad we proved that no one is above the law. But I'm sad that it came to this. Graham was a good senator for many years. Do you think this will prevent other politicians from doing similar things?" "I hope so. This case sends a clear message that political officials can't conduct their own foreign policy just because they disagree with the president." 3 months later, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster appointed a replacement for Graham's Senate seat. The new senator was younger and more closely aligned with President Trump's views. Graham moved back to his hometown in South Carolina. He started a small law practice and began writing a book about his experiences. Sometimes people recognized him on the street. Some were supportive, others were critical. He spent his community service hours working at a veterans hospital, helping former soldiers navigate the government bureaucracy. It reminded him why he had gone into public service in the first place. Late at night, Graham sometimes wondered if he would make the same decision again. He still believed Trump's Ukraine policy was wrong. He still believed he had tried to help America. But he also understood that he had broken the law and damaged the system he had sworn to protect. The case changed Washington in ways both big and small. Politicians were more careful about their communications with foreign officials. The Justice Department's independence was strengthened. And everyone understood that political loyalty had limits. Even in an age of extreme partisanship, Pam Bondi had proven that she would enforce the law fairly, regardless of politics. President Trump had shown that he would not protect allies who betrayed him. And Lindsey Graham had learned that good intentions are not enough to justify breaking the law. The investigation was over, but its effects would last for years.